Hello, everyone. I will get started shortly. We're just waiting for everyone to join the call. It's good to see some familiar faces. We'll start in a minute or so, just making sure everyone gets time to join the call. While we wait so long, maybe drop in the chat where you're from and, well, which country are you currently in and which organization you represent while we get everyone lined up.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, I was sitting like a wally in the Teams meeting that my Zoom link had gone into. I've been on Zoom about 4 times today already. I don't understand how I did that, but sorry for the
No worries. Okay, I think let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Langford. I'm the head of accelerators for Turn.io. At Turn, we're an organization with the mission to help other organizations have life-improving conversations. We're a chat platform, but we're also a community. And we recently launched the Chat for Impact Accelerator in partnership with OpenAI and Agency Fund. And we've had over 500 applications, which made the selection process really competitive. We could only choose 10 organizations, but we wanted to share the knowledge and the learnings with the broader Chat for Impact community, hence the roundtable. So I'd like to welcome you all today. We ask just a few housekeeping. We ask that you keep yourself on mute, put on your video camera. We love to see your faces. We will have tons of opportunity to chat further and have more deeper conversations. We will hear from our expert panelists. We'll have some breakout rooms, but we'd like to launch a poll now just to see kind of what is everyone's experience with generative AI and chat. You know, are you a beginner? Are you an advanced user? It just helps us understand who all is joining us on this call today. So there you can see the poll and go ahead and just pop in your answer. So we have invited 5 panelists and all of them are experts in the area and they're going to share their learnings using generative AI and chat. But before I introduce you to these expert panelists, I'd like you to welcome Alex Nawar, who is from the Global Affairs team at OpenAI. Now, our partnership with them have been a stellar one. And Alex, maybe why don't you tell us, how are you thinking about generative AI and chat in this time?
Sure. Thanks so much, Lisa. So, hi, everybody. I'm Alex Noir. I work on the global affairs team at OpenAI, and I focus on social impact partnerships. And what that really means is working with different organizations around the world who are using generative AI for social good. And where we see the most opportunity is in this specific use case of using chat as some sort of kind of social good mechanism, whether that's empowering frontline workers with information and tools, whether it's providing knowledge about health or education directly to people in a way that's easy for them to access and interact with. There are a ton of use cases all over the world. And so we're so happy to see so many of those use cases represented in your applications. So I think I'm really excited today for the panelists that we have. I think there's some of the leading organizations that are using generative AI. So I think they'll have a lot to offer. And want to thank all of you for your interest in this program and your applications, and to the Turn team for hosting this, because I think it's been a really great opportunity for us to see firsthand a lot of innovation happening in the generative AI space, and to help some of those projects come to life.
Thank you so much, Alec, for your continued support, but also your partnership with Turn. I think looking a year back, we started this partnership, and I must say it's been really good. And just learning from you and your colleagues has been fantastic. Long may it continue. A quick note before I introduce the panelist and our moderator, we will share a little form with you shortly, and that is for you to just register if you're interested in learning more about the AI features that we will be speaking about today. Indrani will pop it in shortly. We'll also share it at the end. But just if you're interested to speak to us further, just fill in the form and we'll get back to you. All right, so getting into the good stuff, I'd like to introduce our panelists today, and I'll start in alphabetical order. First, I'll start with Anupam, one of our longtime partners from NeuroHealth. He is the co-executive director. NeuroHealth is a healthcare organization that strengthens health systems by equipping family caregivers. They have done some amazing work using generative AI, and definitely someone worth listening to, especially with a focus on India and Bangladesh. Second on our panelist is Maria Daishal, who's a co-founder and the CEO of Tangible AI, and their focus is helping nonprofits and social businesses serve people with custom chatbots, analytics, and machine learning solutions. Then we're joined by Linda Raftery, who is a Multech Innovation founder, the New York Tech Salon convener, and a trust and safety advisor. Also joining us is Rahul de Villiers, who is the product lead at Rising Academies, a quality-focused education organization based in Africa. And then lastly, we've got Rob Coram, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Penda Health, and they provide high-quality healthcare provider to everyone in Kenya. So you can see it's a good mixture of education, healthcare practitioners, advisors, and all of them are going to be moderated and led by our own CTO and co-founder, Simon Dohan. So the floor is yours. And I think if we can start off with a quick introduction from Rob. Tell us a bit more about the work that you do and how you're using generative AI.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks for having me on this panel. I'm really excited to speak with everyone about what we do at Penda. So Penda is one of the largest outpatient healthcare providers in Kenya. We operate 16 very busy outpatient medical centers all around Nairobi. And we take care of patients kind of from cradle to grave. We vaccinate babies, and we take care of kids and adults when they're sick, and we take care of chronic conditions into old age. And we're really focused on building trust with patients and creating like a great patient experience for everyone who comes through our door. And when COVID started back in 2020, we really wanted to kind of be a voice and be a way that our patients could still access information and access healthcare if they needed to. And that's when we started really working with Turn. And obviously our chat product has gone through quite a number of evolutions over the last 4 years. And I think where it's at now is it's really kind of it's a digital front door for our patients. It's a way that our patients can do a huge number of things, from figuring out like where exactly our branches are located, what hours they're open, what services we provide there, how much those services cost, and then also get medical information. So it's 10 o'clock at night and my baby has a fever. What do I need to do next? Being able to access both that kind of initial triage, but also telemedicine care if needed. So it really is the main way that we communicate with all of our patients. And we actually have more unique conversations with patients in any given day than we do seeing patients in our branches every day. And we see a lot of patients in our branches. So it's a huge kind of top of funnel for us. And it's also a way that we kind of retain people and take care of people after they leave our clinic doors. So we've had a fantastic experience with Turn so far, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thanks so much, Robert. Excited to have you here today. Hey everyone, as Lisa already mentioned, I'm Simon. I'll be moderating today. The next one up is Anubhav. Anubhav, please share a little bit about you and your work at Nora.
Thanks, Simon. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. So Lisa did give a one-line introduction to Nora, so at Nora, we train patients and their family members on healthy behaviors through both in-hospital sessions. We work with public hospitals across India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia at different levels of care, from tertiary down to primary and community health levels. And so we train patients and family members both through sessions in these facilities, as well as through a mobile-based follow-up messaging service, which is primarily on WhatsApp. And obviously, we work very closely with Turn. On WhatsApp, just like Penda Health, we offer two-way Q&A support. And every day, on an average, our clinical help desk is answering about 1,000 questions in about 9 regional languages. And this obviously involves a bunch of tasks, such as searching a knowledge bank, assessing potential risk, customizing the response to match the user's tone and language. And so where we have started using generative AI capabilities is to build a health desk assistant, essentially to solve two use cases. One, to categorize the incoming user queries, to classify them by intents and risk levels. And second, by helping our nurses, by helping our
Asif, please, maybe you can just unmute yourself if you've joined. Thank you.
Sorry for that. And then the second application that we are building is really helping our help desk generate suitable responses to those user queries. And I'll just leave you all with 3 very high-level insights that we'll further dig into during the next hour or so. So one, it's not just about the tech buzzwords. It's about really designing the user journeys and really keeping the user at the center. Second, don't rush to deploy. Validate why you are building, why you're using GenAI, deploy progressively. And third, don't live in your own bubble. Build adaptable workflows, be part of communities like these. Keep an eye out, because the space is shifting and changing rapidly. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anubhav. Great to have you as part of the conversation today. Now, Linda, please introduce yourself, share a couple of words with us. Thanks.
Sure. So I'm Linda Raftry, and I'm the founder of the Merle Tech Initiative, and we've been around since 2014. We're kind of a cross-sectoral intermediary, I guess you would say, and we help people working in the development and the humanitarian space to think about responsible use of technologies. And that includes a focus on the monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning. And so we've been thinking quite a lot about generative AI over the past several months. about 18 months. We were planning to launch a community practice around AI in around June of 2022. And then we're planning our first meeting when ChatGPT was launched to the public. So we have now about 650 people in our community. Our goals are really to strengthen and grow collective learning and influence, and really help democratize technical understanding of natural language processing and generative AI approaches very strongly throughout the development in the humanitarian communities, helping people learn from each other, collaborations. In our community, we have data scientists and nonprofit founders and folks working really hard, a lot on the tech side, as well as folks who are, very beginner around, technologies. Some of the things that we've been focusing on are bringing people together to kind of share what they're piloting, what they're learning from those pilots. And then we've been developing guidance as public goods around ethical use of emerging technologies, especially right now, generative AI. And one of the main ones that we've been working on lately is kind of internal guidance for organizations that are using these commercial tools, and then also some guidelines around how to build tools when you're using generative AI for the build of chatbots and that sort of thing. So that's some of the stuff that we're up to.
Thanks so much, Linda. We've known you over the years, and it's really a privilege, and it's great to have you here and speak from your expertise and insights. Maria, please introduce yourself and share your few words with us as well, please. Thanks.
Hi, guys. So I've been running Tangible AI, which makes AI affordable and accessible for nonprofits for the last 5 years. So we kind of started with AI, as we say, before the current hype. In the current age of generative AI, what we focus on is helping our clients to have safe and reliable AI conversations within the existing bots. So we basically try to understand how we can enhance the bots that people have with advanced AI capabilities, and are building a platform that would allow you to add a knowledge to your chatbot without leaving a platform like Turn. And second is to have guided AI conversations. So the idea that we're experimenting with a lot is this idea of, can we have an experience similar to a scripted AI to a scripted conversation that we have in more traditional bots. So imagine instead of having the bot follow very specific instructions and offer the user buttons, you have kind of multi-turn conversation where the bot has instructions on how to behave. And I wanted to share an experience that we have racing this kind of scripted conversation against the more traditional deterministic conversation. So we have a bot that's called Cindy, which helps women, that empowers women and helps them cope with imposter syndrome. And basically what we did is we already have a tree of scripted conversations, very much like those that you can create on Turn. But what we did instead is we randomized people, and half of them went to a conversation with generative AI, where generative AI is given instructions on how to guide this conversation in a scripted way. And it led us to see that, for sure, we witnessed the flexibility and the response, how much the flexibility and the responsiveness of conversational AI adds to the conversation, and compare the metrics. So I really love how Abraham, you shared kind of two insights. So I would share two of mine. One is kind of to prepare people that most of your time working with generative AI is going to be spent on making it safe, right? So activities like red teaming, activities like moderating the chats, testing, iterating is going to take most of your time. So this is something that you need to be prepared for. And the second is really, I think, iterative concept is key to AI more than anything. I still see AI as a bit of a wild horse. I would say that needs to be kind of reined in. So prompt iteration and iteration on your application is going to be key to a successful AI implementation. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Maria. The other panelist we have is Raul, but it looks like he's maybe having some trouble with his connection. So we'll proceed so long. Thanks all for joining and introducing yourself. Just for the audience, we've tried to pick a wide variety of experts today to give insights from their various very practical experience and the work that they've done in the field. And all of this is obviously around this idea of using chat to maximize their impact. And how do we do that? How do we use AI and generative AI to maximize their impact as a community? And what are the things that we should be thinking about today? What are the things that we should be thinking about as this field evolves and as we look towards the future? So we have a range of questions today that I'll be asking the panelists and asking them to weigh in on. If you have questions that you want to pose, please use the chat. We'll be breaking out into separate rooms later as well to discuss some of these areas. So maybe that's also an area where some of your questions could be discussed. But in the meantime, while the questions are going on in the next half hour, please use the chat to pop your questions in there, and we'll try and pick them. There's no way, this field is so large and the interest is so massive that it's unlikely that we will get to every single question. So, but if you leave them in the chat, we can at least look at them and get back to them at a later stage and still make sure those are answered. If not on this call, then asynchronously. All right, so let's start with the questions. So I've prepared a number of questions, and I think the field of AI and machine learning, and certainly for using chat, and for us, our focus area as Turn has often been emerging markets. So that's where we've been working for, well, over a decade now, a very, very long time. And one of the challenges has often been around language. What's language support like for these AI systems, these machine learning models? How can we make sure that the audiences we serve, the need that we see, are actually addressed in a way that meets the people where they are and the languages they prefer and the languages they speak? And so about a decade ago, one of my frequent and favorite criticisms was to say, well, where's the language support for all these non-English languages? Like, we don't need better ways to order a pizza online in English. We need better ways for people to access health information in a language that they understand and are familiar with. And so I'd like to focus on that one first, mostly because it's been a pet peeve of mine almost for 10 years. Now, Robert and Anubhav, both your services are in non-English languages. And so, Robert, a lot of yours is in Swahili. Anubhav, you mentioned yours is in 9 different languages. What is the state now for generative AI for non-English languages? What are some of the challenges you've seen? What are your experiences so far? Could you talk and speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I can take that one first, Simon. So I'm obviously not a native speaker of Swahili, but I'm trying to learn. And so one of the ways that I personally use ChatGPT is if I encounter some kind of Swahili phrase that I don't understand, I'll pop it in and try to get a translation back. And I find it to be incredibly good at translating back. And that's also what we find with our chat service, which is delivered in a mix of Swahili and English. So within Kenya, we have many different languages, but most people speak at least some degree of Swahili and English, and we particularly speak a sort of mix of in a single sentence or a single phrase, there will be some Swahili and some English words. And what we find in our service is that the large language model can understand the meaning very, very well. But in terms of outputting a response in that sort of similar mix of English and Swahili, it just really has a hard time doing. And it kind of defaults to a totally English answer or a totally Swahili response. And I think one of the important, high level things for anyone who's developing a large language model approach to their chat service is to really have the tone and the voice in your head of what you're trying to achieve. And for us at Penda, that is to kind of really match that like mix of English and Swahili. And that's one of the main reasons that most of our chats don't actually end up getting sent through from OpenAI, because it just can't quite hit that mix. So I think it's still an area that really does need a lot of work. And I think we have someone from OpenAI, and I hope that they'll really work on like that particular mix that we speak within Kenya.
Yeah, and just to add,
We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, go ahead.
just to add to what Robert just said, yeah, I think over the last more so over the last year or so, there has definitely been an increase in the coverage of in the coverage and support for multilingual languages, and the accuracy of the NLP models have definitely gone up. However, I think when we talk about language, I think it's useful to kind of go one level deeper and kind of distinguish what language tasks are we really talking about. Because I feel these models, especially on non-English languages, do well on certain tasks, but not so well on certain tasks. So for example, if you're talking about generation, I've seen, I think our experience is that, models such as GPT are doing fairly well on Indic languages. But when it comes to translation, transliteration, speech to text, text to speech, translation still good, transliteration not so good, speech to text still, things are need to improve there. And I think the challenge is, again, scarcity of quality and diverse data sets in local languages, and again, scarcity of, especially at the intersection of regional languages and domain knowledge, right? So there are data sets available, let's say, for South Indian languages, but then to find quality data sets, again, diverse data sets for healthcare and for certain South Indian languages, that's when you start seeing some limitations. And then obviously, like, there are linguistic diversities, regional dialects, cultural nuances, idioms, and usage of language changes, especially in India, like every 50 kilometers, right?
Yeah.
Users, I think Robert mentioned this, using code switching, multiple languages. The challenges of what we are facing right now, like when you think about building a user interface, building for non-English languages, there's that added challenge towards that. Cost, right? Like the token cost obviously is higher for non-English languages as well. So yeah, there are challenges, but there is, I think, tremendous growth as well. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the next few months.
Yeah, it's this field is progressing so fast. It's hard to say how quickly this works, because even for the languages that, say, a large language model like OpenAI provides, even for the languages that aren't in the list of officially supported languages, it still behaves better than I would have thought possible at this point. So that is quite incredible. On that, Anuav, if you don't mind me asking, how many languages do you speak yourself?
I'm fluent in two languages, two regional languages, and I'm learning a third one, Urdu.
Yeah. So, and Rob, you mentioned the same. Obviously, you're not a fluent Swahili speaker yet. What systems have you put in place to actually track if your language use on your service is actually good? Do you have an expert employed for every language that you support?
I can answer that for us. So the way we've implemented the OpenAI proposed responses is we always have a human in the loop. And I think that's a decision that probably every organization will need to make, whether that's feasible for them. But that's really like a safety backup for everything from appropriateness of response to prompt injection and for language as well.
Yeah.
And same with us. I think we have humans, experts in every language. We traditionally we used to have a big translation team, so obviously they are helping us kind of verify these responses, but also as we are evaluating the output of these models. I think, as I mentioned, we are kind of evaluating the quality of not the overall output necessarily, but the output of each specific task, right?
Yeah.
And kind of comparing that output. Yeah.
Great. I saw Linda nodding heavily on the human in the loop response. So I want to go to another question, which is more around like the future of AI in social impact. And so I think maybe taking a step back, still a very valid question is like, to what extent should AI systems be employed anyway to meet the growing needs in the social sector? And where should the focus of that AI deployment be? Should it be in fully AI powered solutions? And we all know, like working in this area, that the need is huge for this. So should it be like fully automated AI things, or should we be looking at augmenting the skills and the efficiency of individual humans who are working in this space with AI tools? Obviously, there's a whole bunch of like, between those two, there's a whole spectrum of all sorts of safety, control, all sorts of concerns there. Linda and maybe Maria, what are your takes on this?
I mean, I definitely think human in the loop is really important right now. And I think it depends also on what you're trying to do. So if you're working on, back end office stuff, and you have, trained your AI model yourself and you've tested it a whole lot, and you're not working really in high stakes contexts, and you're not working on high stakes things. I mean, if your summary of your summary of a document has some redundancies in it, and it's not a super important document, big deal. But I think we should be thinking about what our risk appetite is. And so when we're designing for things and we're testing things, how much risk are we willing to take on as organizations? How much risk are we willing to push off onto people who are using our chatbots and things like that? And so I think it's a really critical balance to strike. If the information is slightly off, and it's not a life-threatening issue, or it's not going to get someone killed, or, have someone go down a pathway that's really, really not recommended, then it's less important. But I think really doing a lot of good testing, having a set of values that you're working within at your organization. And then also, I guess, testing, I think we need to be careful about testing things with vulnerable populations that can't actually recover from bad choices or bad information. So I think also testing in really small amounts of people, and making sure that as we go along, we're continually making sure that that our bots are safe. So that's one thing. I mean, that's a risk both for the people that are using your bot, as well as for your organization, for your brand reputation, as well as for AI in general. So if we're using AI and it's, going bad all the time and we haven't done enough testing, then that puts kind of the whole sector at risk. So I think we think about risk at various levels. Obviously, risk to individuals that are, you know, using our tools is the most important, but I think we can think about risk at various levels.
Yeah. Maria, you mentioned at the start, you all help scale AI solutions for nonprofits. And I think that's amazing, but often nonprofits are also working in the areas that are most dicey when it comes to risk and application of AI. And so from your experience, like what controls can a nonprofit put in place to manage the kinds of risks that Linda outlined? And what are your thoughts on fully autonomous whose skills and context is augmented through AI?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start actually from the second question first, and to kind of build upon what Linda said. I think it's important to see this through the lens of kind of ripe fruits versus kind of more kind of strategic blue sky initiatives that are kind of much longer term. So you know, using AI in your workflows is kind of a low hanging fruit. I mean, every one of us has probably experienced it from ChatGPT. So when we train nonprofits on leveraging AI, we kind of start from what you can start doing tomorrow that's going to improve your productivity, right? But I think ultimately the big opportunity in AI is this ability for people to access, you know, to access knowledge on scale, to access better services on scale. So I think, and I think we all agree that humans in the loop are vital. But one day we will want to have these services kind of go beyond human scale and beyond what kind of human assistance can provide, in a sense of, you know, how many human assistants can we have. So I think so I'm kind of, I would say, bullish on people experimenting with kind of direct AI to human on, as Linda mentioned, non-risky cases. So Raul will of course share more of that in our, you know, in the education work that Rising has been doing. But in response to the first question on what organizations can do. So three things, the three things that we've been using the most heavily, right? Guardrails, grounding, and heavy monitoring, right? So guardrails and moderation are all about kind of controlling what your bot says and what is its responses to particular situations, and also in some cases moderation. So basically involving human when certain responses are, and alerting humans when certain responses are given, right? That's one. Grounding and having your bot based on information significantly can reduce hallucinations, in the sense that you know, it's still, I feel that we're still in the beginning in terms of really reliably detecting hallucinations in chatbot talk, but having a base knowledge kind of really helps to understand whether the bot hallucinates or not. And then there is still in this stage no substitute for just heavily you know, having a lot of test conversations, monitoring them, and realizing whether the bot is going to the right direction. So I would summarize it with these three.
Thank you. When you mentioned grounding, just for the audience, do you mean the ability to upload pre-existing documents as a knowledge base for the scope within which a AI model can respond. Is that what you understand under grounding?
Yeah, exactly. So adding custom knowledge to your bot, and then basically, so again, it's one of the difficulties with generative AI, right, is what we describe as hallucinations, right, is often just large language model doing their own thing, right, generating text. But then once you know kind of what, what is basing upon, then it's easier to add some form of check of, did what you just say is based on the knowledge that you were provided.
Yeah. Thank you. Raul, I didn't have an opportunity to introduce you earlier, but thanks for joining. All of the other panelists spent about 3 minutes just describing their use case. Before we move to the next question, which I want to pose you as well, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about Rising?
Sure. So we are an education provider, and we predominantly run schools in North Africa, but increasingly we are getting into educational tools, and one of these is a maths chatbot called Rory, and Rory is almost like an after-school maths tutor to students. So that's one of our new e-classroom or e-learning tools that we're starting to move in, and we're moving into this field quite substantially. And yeah, and I'm involved with Rory. I was up until recently the product co-lead on the technical side, and I'm taking on a slightly different role going forward. But up until for the last year, I've been basically responsible for building the technical infrastructure in Rory. Yeah.
So the next question I have is around personalization of some of these services, and specifically we're talking about generative AI.
Yes.
So content generation within the scope of generative AI and personalization. From the work that you all have done with Rory, can you speak a little bit about how effective AI, these large language models, are in generating educational content that adapts to individual learning styles and needs? And are there any specific learnings that have come out of the work that you all have done?
Okay, so we have been quite cautious in terms of moving into personalized content. So at the moment, I would say the majority of our content is quite closely scripted. And the reason for that is that that content ties back to a system called the Global Proficiency Framework, which is essentially a list of skills that children are supposed to acquiring during their school years. Yeah. So most of our content ties very tightly back, very closely back to the Global Proficiency Framework. But in between, we do have some what we call enrichment chats. In other words, we try and serve content to the user or to the student, the learner, that gives them a kind of a break from this really intensive mathematics practice. So we have done some personalizations there using generative AI. We have many of the same concerns that people have raised up to now. I would say, actually, so if you talk in an educational context, I think many people are concerned about the almost trust and safety and a generative AI model saying something that it really shouldn't. What we find actually a much more prominent problem when you try and personalize these conversations, it's just the strange little things like the tone not being exactly right for a learner. Or the conversation kind of starts to stray a little bit, so there's like a drift almost. The more conversational turns you do with a language model, the more the language model starts to drift off topic. So yes, we do have some kind of personalization in terms of that we look at where the user's level is, and we look at a few other things when we determine what kind of conversation we're going to serve them. But at the moment, those conversations are fairly short. And we really we're doing the same things as everyone else. We've got a lot of guardrails in place, and we're also doing a lot of monitoring to try and understand, exactly how effective those conversations are and how much control should we really place on them. So I think moderation is a really big ongoing topic so if you're going to personalize, I think that the responsibility to moderate becomes even more. And hopefully what will start to happen is that there'll be a lot more models that specialize in moderation. In other words, it's almost like, so the only way I think the scaling problem that Maria was talking about, so the only way I think we're going to solve the scaling problem in terms of personalization of a huge audience is some kind of self-policing system. In other words, you have AI models policing other AI models in terms of checking them and moderating them. I think that's the only real solution there. But I think we're all a little bit scared in terms of moving into that, really, because then we really give control over completely, both in terms of personalization as well as in terms of safety, moderation, all those things. So how are we going to exactly do that? I think we're still finding our feet there.
Yeah. So there's a tension between generative AI and application and the outcomes that we're trying to get. And on one side, non-determinism, and the other one, very deterministic. This needs to happen exactly this way. Just want to open it up to Linda and Rob and Anubhav. What's your experience in that space? Because clearly, I mean, we are impact organizations where there's very clear outcomes that we're working towards, that we want to achieve. As Turn, we want to see organizations use our platform to drive very specific outcomes that people are happier and healthier because of the services they've been interacting with. So how do you all balance that tension between fully generative, highly, maybe a little bit more like on the user experience side versus the very scripted, deterministic, these are the outcomes that we're going to. And like there somewhere, I think that the sweet spot is probably in the middle somewhere. But what's your experience with that? Linda, Robert,
I guess I didn't know who was gonna speak first, but you know, I think you're right. I think, you know, we see this all the time with developing any kind of technology. It's like this kind of balance between friction and safety. And so I think when you're first starting with something, you may want to have it much more controlled, just because you're testing and you don't want to create any harms as you're testing. And then as you go along, I think you start to test little things, maybe allow it to be a little more creative. And again, the creativity or the potential for hallucination for your bot, I know you can tweak that in different models. And again, that depends on what are you trying to do? Are you giving, you know, sexual reproductive health advice to girls that are in really restrictive communities? And if you give them bad advice, they're going to be, you know, killed by their mother-in-law? Or are you, you know, helping someone with some creative after-school project? I mean, they're very, very different types of creativity that you want, and very, again, different levels of risk that I think are permissible within a bot. And so I think those are some of the things that you want to think about. And I think another aspect that I find is, and you know, and other panels have talked about this, is the challenge with nuance that a lot of large language models have. And so, you know, one very common thing that we hear all the time is, you know, if someone, you know, types into a bot, you know, I'm pregnant, the reaction might not be congratulations. The reaction might actually be, I'm so sorry. Do you need, you know, services? Maybe that person got pregnant and didn't want to be pregnant. Maybe they were, you know, survivor of some type of a sexual assault, and that's how they ended up being pregnant. Maybe they're underage. Maybe they were cheating on their spouse, and that, you know, so there's all these different things that it's really hard for, I think, language models to know what exactly, you know, what the response should be when you set them free. Which is where, you know, if you're more tailored in how you're training your models, you might be able to then train a model to ask a few more very specific questions to kind of get to what maybe the better response should be for that type of a situation. And so I'm sure others have more specific experiences with that. I'm speaking a little bit theoretically, but I'll hand off to Rob, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I can pick up exactly where you're leaving off, because at Penda, we sort of divide the work on this into the technical engineering aspect, which is really about prompt engineering, and then the product aspect, which is what is our voice, what is our tone, how do we expect conversations to go, right? And I think both are very, very important to do. And it's not a given that you will necessarily know the answer to your product question. And if you don't have a pretty clear idea of how you want to engage with your users, then how can you effectively prompt engineer?
Yeah.
And I think, like others have said, it's a constant cycle of iteration where, okay, you think you know what, how the conversation should go, you build it into the prompt, then you're kind of checking how well did we prompt engineer? Did that align to our vision of sort of our voice and how the conversation should go? And then you may even find that it did, but now we need to go back and we need to rethink about the product. And I think, Linda, you gave some examples that could be very much real world of it, when someone says they're pregnant, it is not always congratulations. And that's more of a product question than a how do I prompt engineer question.
Yeah, and I think I think nothing to add to what Rob and Linda said. So maybe just summarizing from our experience point of view, I think exactly it's a product question for us as well, and towards that, really answering who the intended user of the bot is going to be, right?
Yeah.
Is it? I mean, there are assistants, agents by the bulk these days. Are you opening up the chatbot directly to the end user, or to the frontline worker, or to an internal team member? And in each of those three different, for each of those three different users, the experience would be completely different. And I think really mapping those user journeys end to end, right? And how the user is really collaborating with the AI component becomes very critical, because usage and it can't be deterministic, at least where the models today are. So you need to make your workflows adaptive, and that's only possible if you understand the user and their journey really, really well.
And so what I find fascinating about like a really transformative step change in what technology can do, like AI, is that it has implications for our current roles, our education system, and whatnot. And one of the things that I've been talking internally at Turn as well about is that I'm really convinced that, like, within computer science degrees, we missed the mark that we didn't introduce things like role playing in computer science, because I think it's essential. Like, seeing where these fields evolve to, ability to like have empathy towards another role and understand their world and the way they interact with systems is crucial for you to understand how they would interact with the service that you're designing. And that leads to better prompts. I'm convinced about this. So I think the follow-up question on that one, and Maria and Linda, please weigh in on this one as well, is like what collaborative efforts between prompt engineers, AI developers, not sure what we call these roles yet, that are kind of emerging, and social impact leaders are necessary to make sure that AI meets the social impact needs that we're at least recognizing now. What would you suggest as collaborative efforts? Sorry.
Go
So,
ahead, Maria. Okay, I'll go. I mean, I think so. So I studied anthropology, and everyone always says, well, how the heck do you use anthropology? And it's because anthropology is really trying to understand why people do what they do. And so I think, looking into the social sciences is really important to kind of align and work together with data science and with technologists is one really important thing. And I think having people in the room together and having conversations, and we have a lot on the social side. We have a lot to learn from technologists, but technologists also have a lot to learn from folks in the social sector. And so I think really finding space, and that's pretty much what we try to do at in our community practices, is have space where people can collaborate, people can share, we can align on values, on ethics, on responsibilities, and we can learn from each other, because we don't all know everything. I might think, oh, the system should do this, and the technologist, might say, well, the system can't do that. You don't understand how the system works. So let's try and understand how the system works. And then you explain to me how your community works, and then we'll, kind of work together. And I think slowly we're starting to find there aren't lots of unicorns, but I think there are folks that have been around in the sector for a while that have been through a lot of the other technology iterations, mobile for development and blockchain and drones and all this stuff. And so it's really kind of, I heard this term called an axial knowledge holder. And it was kind of folks that have worked in all of these different iterations of technology and have some really core good practices that we know that we learned in the past. And so how do we bring that good knowledge into what we're doing now? And then I think the last thing I'll say is really thinking about intermediaries. So I know I've always played a role of trying to interpret across, technology to social sector and social sector to technology. And so I think those intermediary roles are really, really critical when we're doing this kind of work.
Maria, as a developer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so speaking of it as from the AI developer perspective, I think I think all of us are noticing that there is still a lot of hesitation around even starting to experiment with generative AI. That's my personal feeling. I don't know how you guys in turn feel. And I think what will help, and I personally really believe that we owe our beneficiaries to use the best tools to achieve, to promote our communities, to help our communities, right? So to help kind of other organizations to break this kind of initial hesitation, which is totally understandable, I think what we need is two type of case studies, right? That we can kind of share with each other, right? One, I would call them kind of the better case studies, right? Can we do what we already do, what we already try to do without generative AI, but better with generative AI, right? And this can be stuff like accessing the knowledge, right? I'm thinking about all the bots there with complex menus and complex intent recognition in order to provide pieces of information to people. Can we do it better, right, with generative AI and with RAG? And the other one, so if we can kind of show this almost kind of side by side and see the improvement that we see while implementing this new technology. So this is one. And the other one, I think, is really the new, right? So what were we able to do before that we are able to do now with generative AI? So I think we definitely, so I salute Robert, and I salute Anubhav, and I salute Raul, guys, because I think you play such an important role as a kind of the pioneers of the sector. And I think we just need more of that to see, for people to be more confident, right? And that's why we are here as developers, and we need collaborators on the social sector side, because you are the guys with the needs, right? So that's kind of the answer in short.
All right, I'm sure we could continue talking about this for a very, very long time, but I'm just conscious of time. I think a closing question is that there are tremendous opportunities for the social sector and social impact using AI. There are risks involved there as well that we need to study and find ways of addressing or managing in ways that we feel is adequate for the use case. There's a need for experimentation, but in a safe way, in order to know what works and what doesn't work. So as we go forward, I would love to just very short from each of you, would love to hear, like, what are some of the things that you feel as in community we should be focusing on today? And what are the things that we think we can defer to later? And so Linda, I'm going to start with you. What are a practitioner who's wanting to introduce AI into the service today? What should they be doing today as a first step?
And for me, the first step is AI literacy. If people don't understand what AI is, how it works, they're going to continue to be afraid of it, or they're going to use it irresponsibly. So 100% we need to do much larger efforts to help people understand all the ethical issues as well as the practical issues and the technology behind it. So I think that for me is front and center.
All right, thank you. Anubhav, what is it for you for today, and what do you think we can defer to the future? Just very briefly as we close.
I would say being mindful of developing AI solutions in an inclusive manner is something I would love to see more of. And yeah, and the harder problems, I guess, human AI collaboration, I think we'll find a sweet spot in due time. So not too worried about as of today. Yeah.
Thanks. Robert, what's it for you?
I think focusing on a fairly narrow use case to start is really helpful. So for us, we get so many different types of conversations, and I think focusing in on how do we answer questions about hours of operation and service availability really well using generative AI, and we can punt the medical triage stuff to later.
Yeah, thanks. Raul.
Yeah, I would say and this kind of also relates to if you want to get into this, but use generative, and it also ties into what Maria said, but basically use generative AI for incoming information. So use it for analysis and classification and interpretation. That's a very easy place to start. It does it really well. You can send it spreadsheets. You can send it, conversations that your clients or customers or the people that you serve have run those through generative AI, use it in that way rather than using it for a communication going out. And then, or if you do it for communication going out, be very, very careful, as we've said. So the future is definitely very comprehensive ability to send outgoing information, to generate information that you can send out safely and into the world. So I think at the moment, step one is definitely great. It's safe. It's easy to use. That's the place to start. Step two, as we've I think found from the conversation so far, that's really where you have to be quite careful. So I think that's not yet ready. Step one, absolutely go full in on that.
Thank you. Maria.
Yeah, I would say I would really connect to what Robert said, and I say step one is choose your one thing, right? Choose your one experiment that you want to focus on. And I'm sure that you had some ideas from here of what that might be. So I think so there are a lot of things that are still I think too risky. So I think the kind of just know how to differentiate between the ripe fruits, the low hanging fruits, and something that's kind of more blue sky. That's my take on this.
All right, thanks so much. This has been great. Like I said, there's so much still to cover here, and half an hour doesn't really, well, I think I can speak for all of us that we can continue this conversation for much, much longer. Luckily, we're about to break into rooms and talk about these topics a little bit more in depth. Lisa, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Simon, I hear you. I could definitely, I think next time we add another half an hour, even better. I think we should have it in person. So there, you've heard it here first. I'm putting it out there. We need an in-person meetup. We have created some breakout rooms now, trying to focus around the themes that have been discussed. So there's one around the risk and opportunities, costing models and implementation, help desk assistance, and content creation. Each one of the panelists will be in a room, and the turn team will be there as well. But this is your rooms. Select the room that you want to go to. If you're not sure, just stay in the main room. But we really encourage you to choose a room, take part of the conversation. We'll take about 10 minutes to have that conversation, then we'll come back and kind of share a bit of what we've learned from one another. So I'm opening the rooms now, and in theory, you should be able to have a little prompt, and you should be able to choose the room that you would like to go to. If you're struggling to see the rooms, you can just let me know and I can assign you, but you should see a little room request pop up. And oh, okay, let's see. I am just going to have a quick look. I am going to quickly assign you all to random rooms. So let's see how this goes.
And see the rooms, Lisa?
Yes, I'm busy assigning them.
Okay, got it.
What you have to do manually.
Yeah, that's odd. I did also not see that option. Oh.
Manish and Andrani, you would have been assigned to rooms now manually.
Can you assign a risk one, Lisa? That's what is.
I just randomly said one, so if you can.
See, Angela and Emma are still around. Do you and Andre, Wilfred, a few others?
Yeah, I think they will need to accept the assigned.
Got it. Okay. So, Lisa, once everybody's back, we said 15 minutes, right? Let's put a timer on that and then we
Yeah, we
can.
might have to make it 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll give a quick call.
Did you already put a timer on the rooms for 10 or?
I'm
do
just
we
keeping an
decide?
eye on the timer.
Got it. Okay. Okay, you assign Andre to the risk and opportunities.
Of that.
Hey, Jonathan. Everybody, if you're wondering, is actually in breakout rooms. We've got 4 breakout rooms. I'm just going to post it here. If you can pick one of them, we can assign you to one of the rooms. So you've just joined.
And Ronnie, I'm just thinking about the timing. I think I'd rather give people a little bit more time to discuss, and then we can shorten the feedback session. So I'll let
That's right.
I think.
Yeah, so I think you're saying we reduce the discussion post. So we'll give them the full. It's now 11:15, so maybe, yeah, 10, 15, to 11:20. 7 more minutes from now.
Yeah.
And just remember that when you stop it, it gives them 1 minute extra. So we just have to, yeah. New plant, Lisa. The one behind.
What?
You got a new plant?
That's very observant of you.
Mm.
I'm closing the rooms now.
All right.
I don't know, I think what happened with the other one.
Please.
Hello, Joe. How are you?
I was going to ask in chat, but is this under Chatham House rules, or are you happy for people to kind of say you're going to post anything on social about a great event?
You can always post about it, social
Yeah.
about a great event. How are you doing?
Yes, good. Yeah, have a few days off to go to the Hay Festival. So looking
Oh,
forward to that.
fantastic. Oh, I hope the weather turns around.
Yeah, they've got flood warnings on at the moment.
Oh my goodness. Never a dull moment. Oh, everyone's coming back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see. It looks like everyone is back in the room. I bet you feeling we wish we could have these conversations for longer. Well, the good news is, one, we can have these conversations for longer because we have a Chat for Impact community. And that's exactly what that is for. It's on WhatsApp. We'll share the link now. Feel free to join there. It is a community of practitioners all using chat specifically to have impact across different sectors. So feel free to join there and let's continue the conversation there. And then the last notice as well before we summarize the day is that if you're interested in learning more specifically about Turn and the AI features, and if you want to chat further to us, feel free to fill in the form that's being shared now in the chat window. So with that said, I'm going to call on my lovely colleagues. I've got Pippa, Nathan, Simon, and Sophie that were each in different rooms. Maybe Pippa, if I can call on you first. What was discussed in your room? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about data privacy, and actually it was very, very practical discussion. So we had people from all across the world all dealing with very different use cases, from WASH to education. And we're talking a little bit around some new frameworks that are coming in place with data protection, and how that differs across different countries. And how these generative AI models may or may not be adding extra risks onto the existing setup. So we talked about the differences between hosting your own model versus using a hosted model like those provided by organizations like OpenAI, and what implications that had. Linda recommended a fabulous exercise, which is called a data journey map, where you map out all of the data and where it's going to go, who's going to touch it, when is it going to go to a third party, and use that as a way to work backwards to understand, okay, where are the data risks, what do you need to have in place to do that. She also shared a cheat sheet, and Linda, I'm going to ask you to pop it in the general chat here, because it's a cheat sheet on the EU AI Act that came out recently and how to comply with that, which is kind of ahead in best practices in terms of regulation around AI in the EU, which I think is super important. And yeah, so we had a fantastic discussion. I think call out in terms of making sure that if you introduce generative AI to your services, make sure you have great data protection agreements and privacy policies in place beforehand, so that your users also know how their data is going to be used going forward. So that's it from our group.
Wow. Thanks, Linda, for that resource. We'll make sure that it gets shared with the broader community as well. Sophie, do you want to maybe summarize what you guys chatted about?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So we talked about content generation, and specifically we talked about how to ground and how to ground to different sources and different agents. and also how to try to eliminate or prevent or minimize the risk of hallucinations and drift. We also talked about some different examples of hallucinations that people have had. It's quite funny and interesting. So some of them were, somewhat expected. You give it a website and it just comes up with things that sound great but aren't on the website. The same is true sometimes for documentation, that it'll just funny, wrong inferences. And then I think my favorite example was Noor was using it to generate content for teaching people math and test preparation. And he asked it to generate an incorrectly labeled pie chart and got a picture of a pie with fruits on it, which I think is just a really nice example. Yeah, I'll hand back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Sophie. Nathan, what would you like to share?
Yeah, so we were discussing kind of cost in the context of running or using these models. And I think Rob had a really kind of great kind of case where essentially what Penda is doing as their kind of yardstick of how much are we spending on this and is it worth it, is to go, well, what's the next best alternative? And that would be, well, what is the cost of paying another help desk operator's salary? And so then at least they kind of have a benchmark of going, right, well, X is their salary. We're paying slightly less than X for this service that all of our help desk operators use. And so it's a useful way of just kind of evaluating whether the cost is worth the benefit to their users, and kind of then kind of going, well, what's the KPI we're interested in? And that's response time. The other thing that was kind of talked about was using these hosted services versus self-hosting and the costs involved there. And I think one of the reflections was, look, hosted services are much cheaper when you kind of factor in things like the cost not only of the computers to run your own models, but the expertise needed to run those own models. And that the cost or what would justify that is again kind of touching on user privacy. So if you can guarantee that your user data is not leaving your platform, then that's a good enough justification for pursuing it. I think one of the interesting things that Sriram had to contribute was that they are looking at self-hosting their own models, but it's relatively much cheaper if you already have in-house kind of technical expertise and kind of your developers are a fixed cost, and so can you use them to kind of investigate or use self-hosted models in that respect, but dealing with kind of things like the number of requests as they escalate. How do you keep a cap on those costs? We weren't able to sort that out in the time we had. And then finally, model choice as a factor in when it comes to cost. And again, it was kind of like Penda was seeing really good results with GPT-4, but Sriram also was kind of saying that in their experience, sticking with GPT 3.5 at their scale made sense if they weren't doing anything kind of really complicated or in terms of needing kind of logical steps, because you are kind of paying, it's an additional kind of order of magnitude more expensive to use those models. So yeah, we had a really great chat and would have loved to have continued as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Nathan. And then lastly, Simon, in your breakout room.
Yeah, so we spoke about concept of help desk assistants and assistants more generally within the large language model and generative AI space. Anubhav shared that there's still difficulty in getting it to stick to the content and tone. But we also took a step back and said, well, how do we define an assistant actually? And I think that it's still emerging. The loose definition that we're at right now is a combination of very specific prompts and a specific knowledge base that together sets the tone of the responses, but also obviously the scope of the responses and the replies it's able to generate. And so some of the challenges that we see or that were shared around assistance is obviously a custom knowledge base. How do you retrieve knowledge reliably from it? And determinism and consistency is still a challenge within that space. And one of the solutions that we spoke about, or one of the ways to go about this that we discussed, was that as the state of the art is right now in large language models, that often a single purpose assistant works best. so that you have an assistant for a very specific task, and you upload specific knowledge and information for that task to that assistant, and that assistant only replies within that. And it also speaks to the ability, like say on a platform like Turn, but other platforms can possibly do this as well. I'm no expert there. But on Turn, the way that you can do this is that, just building on the conversations that we've had so far today around determinism, is that you can have a fairly deterministic journey inside Turn, and then at some point say, well, we're confident that this assistant is actually well suited to answer the question that's coming in, and then you direct it to this assistant that's specifically trained and has knowledge for that particular type of question, for example, so that you have not perfect, but definitely more control and guardrails and grounding, as Maria has put it, for the responses that maybe you would get as a suggestion, say in a automated help desk type of environment, or even a human in the loop environment. So that was, I think, the discussion that we had in the assistance. Like the others, we could have continued for quite some time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon. I'm going to hand over to Pippa, one of our other co-founders and our Chief Strategy Officer, to finish us off for the day. We are a little bit over time, but I think we would all love to hear more from you, Pippa.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, to be honest, it's been an absolute privilege to be here and to hear the amazing discussion that has been going on. And I just wanted to thank all the panelists for sharing your wisdom and your learning. As I think Maria said, you know, being the brave ones who've gone ahead and willing to experiment in a safe manner in high-risk scenarios in the social sector. And so we're very honored that you guys have taken those steps forward so we can all learn from you. So thank you so much for doing that. I must say I got like a couple of great insights from here. I don't know about you, and I also found them very practical. So I'm going to go through a couple of the things we chatted about. So what was super interesting for me in when we're talking about language and the use of generative AI in different regional languages was around how it's better at understanding than it is as perhaps generating text for some of these more regionalized languages, where there might be an issue around the nuance particularly, and the scarcity of data sets around in the combination of a language plus a domain area, as Anubhav was talking about in his case with Nura, as well as like simple cost things like prompting in Indic languages is more expensive than prompting in English. So those types of things I felt super interesting. But the one that stuck with me a lot was around the issues around tone and how much time people are spending actually trying to get these assistants to speak in a tone that feels comfortable for them as an organization, the tone that they want to express in their service. And so when we chatted about content generation and personalization, I think it was super interesting to dig more into that, as well as understanding a bit about how these LLMs sometimes drift off topic if you leave them to chat. I think we previously talked about chatting versus achieving. LLMs like to chat, and sometimes you just want to get something done. So there's always a balance between kind of what areas of these chat services you should design to be more deterministic, right? And which areas should or can benefit a lot from being more non-deterministic and generative. And I think people often think you need to be one or the other. You either need to have an LLM powered chatbot or you have a rule-based chatbot, and it's not so black and white. You can have amazing experience by combining these tools in the right places within your experience. I liked how Maria focused on two questions. There's what do I want the chats with my GenAI service to be like? And what is good prompt engineering? Sorry, I think that was actually you, Rob. And the focus around potentially role-playing being introduced into I think, Simon, not only engineering degrees, I think other degrees as well as ways are working. Read a fantastic article the other day that Nathan and our team shared, where it talked about prompt engineering actually just being explaining. And all these tech people must stop talking about it in such complicated terms, that teachers and anthropologists like Linda and journalists and people that are used to interviewing and explaining and communicating are actually very well positioned to be explaining to these LLMs how they should be doing their job. And I laughed a bit at how things like being polite or shouting in caps lock at an LLM can get you different reactions. And so there's lots still to learn around the nuance of that. But then I just want to touch on, you know, safety and the impact sector specifically. We talked a bit about human in the loop and how essential that is as we look at the different risks of different types of services in the sector. We talked about guardrails, grounding, and monitoring, which I think is GGM, great little acronym for you guys to remember in terms of protecting and de-risking your services. Guardrails around controlling what your service says and responds to particular scenarios when it doesn't respond, for example. Grounding, being given that extra knowledge base so that you can reduce hallucinations. And then there was a lot of emphasis on testing, monitoring, testing, iterating, which I think is true of all good technologies, and not just generative AI. And last but not least, the steps you should take if you're wanting to get into this generative AI space for social impact. So number one, get quizzed on AI literacy, understand what these things can do so you know how to think about it. Step two, use it for incoming analysis, low risk, right? And analyze chats, interpret them, understand your user inputs using these tools as a first step to understand how they work. And then three, choose one narrow experiment to start with. Choose a narrow use case, and then think of an inclusive manner in which to deliver that. So those are your 4 steps from this expert panel on how to get started. And I want to just thank Alex at OpenAI as well for being here, as well as this journey. I think between Turn and OpenAI, we share the wish that these tools will become and will benefit all of humanity, and will be prolific in the social impact space for achieving health and education and improved livelihoods. And so with that, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for being here today. Thanks to Lisa for putting this all together, as well as Maria for the idea. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We chat soon.
Bye everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Um,